one of the best ways, there's literally a stat that I pulled from a survey in an email from Pod News a few months back, where some professional podcast did a study, and they found that the number one way that people were finding new podcasts was not social media. It was actually from word of mouth sharing. So the fact that you are getting people who consume your podcast episodes and love your content and are sharing it with other people, that is literally the fastest way to grow.
Hello, welcome to Monetizing Mompreneurs podcast, where I take you behind the scenes with industry leaders, entrepreneurs, moms, working professionals, and amazing people pursuing their passions and going for their dreams. And I'm your host, Linda Mendable. Erin is a 9-to-5 dropout turned brand podcast partner who specializes in guiding 6 to 7 figure online coaches and mentors, particularly existing podcasters, to create binge-worthy podcasts. When their current podcast strategy isn't quite hitting the mark, her unique approach to podcast strategy audits everything from the ground up, identifying gaps, sourcing creative solutions, and incorporating human design to tailor strategies to her clients' unique personalities and energy levels. Erin believes podcasts can expand you, amplify your voice and your mission, and deepen your community connection, all while supporting your business strategically without overcomplicating your actual life. She has guided clients who launched their shows scared-ish lists, then hit Apple's top 100 in one day. I need some tips. She's helped grow podcasts that her clients are obsessed with, shows that bank them over 1K downloads per episode, make passive sales, and get lots of love in the DMs while they sleep. Erin, you're timely. Thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Linda. I am just happy to be here. I'm very excited for today's conversation.
Girl, I'm so excited because I see that you got a lot of strategy, and let's talk about it. Let's talk a little bit of how you got into it, and then let's go straight into strategy.
Sounds great. So I will tell you, like my bio says, I was in the 9-to-5 grind. I have 3 small children. And after the birth of my third child, I literally turned 30, within days after she was born. And I could just foresee the next 5 years of her toddlerhood and her being the last child. And I was like, I don't want to be on this train. I don't want to feel like I only have a couple hours in the evening to spend with my kids and miss out on getting them off the bus and all of those typical things that you have to do when you're working full time away from the home. So I knew that I could apply my skills, and I was in a pest control company. I worked for a pest control company and did HR, did administrative work, and was essentially the go-between person between the husband and wife owner and then the rest of the company. So I knew I could apply my skills online and do something from home, but I didn't know exactly how that worked. So I did like what most people might do when they find the online space that we're immersed in, and I became a VA. So I started doing graphic design for people on Instagram and just odds and ends. I knew how to do things with websites, so I would help people on the back end. And within about 6 months, I realized I needed some direction, so I hired a coach. She helped me push forward with where I wanted to go. And within the next 6 months, I was able to actually leave my 9-to-5 completely and work from home. And that same time period, I got into podcasting. I worked with another podcast producer, and my husband actually had all the equipment and was in a podcast himself. So I was used to the recording side here at home, but not the actual production side. So I learned through somebody else's team and being a part of that environment, and then realized what areas appealed to me most, and ended up branching off and doing it on my own. So that's where I went. I started doing podcast production and then never looked back. And then as I've gotten further along, helping clients launch, helping clients go through, bringing their show to life, to doing all the back end tasks that have to be done, like the editing and the graphics and promoting it and all of that stuff, I started to lean harder into strategy. And primarily my clients are business coaches. So knowing how their businesses work and the kinds of offers that they offer to their clients, from one-on-one coaching to high ticket to memberships to all of that stuff, we had to kind of integrate how does their podcast fit into that strategy and that funnel while also still serving them. And within the last year or so, I would say I actually ended up working more with existing podcasters than people launching new shows, which I did not expect. I rolled out this wonderful launch program and then ended up working with existing podcasters. So it was kind of funny how that ended up playing out. But now, I find that people who've been doing it for like at least a year, sometimes it starts to feel stale, or it no longer fits with their lifestyle, their schedule, what they want to talk about. They know the basics, they got it down, but now they want to expand in a different way. And so they need a pivot. So that's where I am now, is really trying to support those people who need strategies to kind of play and experiment and find the joy in their podcast again. So yeah.
I think that's such an amazing story. And it's kind of like serendipitous, I guess, because your husband already had the equipment, and so boom, you went in all in into the podcast game. So let's talk a little bit about strategy. What is the number one question that you receive when you first talk with a potential client or lead? What are they asking you?
That's a good question. Oh man. Okay, so it varies. I don't think that there's one particular question that is like the hot button, but I will say one that does come up more often is this like feeling bored and lackluster. So they're trying to find, it's not necessarily a specific question that they ask me, but it's more like a feeling. So they'll come to me and they'll be like, my show's just it's just not where it needed to be. Or a lot of the time they've taken a break. So they had the show for maybe a year and then it started to just feel overwhelming. So they take a break for a couple of months and they still feel that call and that drive to want to have the podcast. Their audience ate it up when they had it, but the way that they were doing it just isn't working anymore. And it doesn't matter if they had a team behind them doing all of the back end stuff, or just maybe one person helping, or they're doing it themselves. It just doesn't feel fulfilling. So we drill down into, then I start asking the questions. We start drilling down into why didn't it feel fulfilling? What was it that was overwhelming? Do we need a back end system to be more refined in our workflow for ourselves or our VA or our team or whatever it is? Or is it that the content that you're talking about is so repetitive and routine that it's making you feel trapped and that you can't talk about the things you really want to talk about? I like to use, you were talking about strategy. I love human design. I don't know if you're familiar with human design, but you're not? Okay. So human design combines astrology and lots of different mediums to help you get a picture of how you operate. It's kind of like the Enneagram, but taken to a different level. So it's not just your personality, but it's also your energy levels and how you make decisions and navigate the world, and where you feel that like deep pull calling for what you want to impact. So I use human design to help me better understand some of those things about my clients on a general level. So for example, I have worked with people, lots of people that are manifesting generators, which means that in the very highest way, bird's eye view that you could look at it, these are people who like to be multi-passionate and hop around with things. So they are constantly putting up new offers if they're business coaches, let's say. They are diving into different hobbies every couple of months, let's say. If they do one thing and solely one thing over and over and over again, it becomes repetitive, it becomes stale and boring, and they hate it and they will quit. So finding how do we continue with a podcast that is repetitive, because you're putting out episodes probably every week to your listeners, right? How do we find a way for that to not feel boring for you? that would be a question I would ask them, and we would explore, do we need to only plan content for like a month or two or no further than a quarter out? Do we need to have an internal check-in every quarter to make sure that it still feels fresh? Do you need to change up what types of topics you're covering? So if it's a business podcast, it's not all about business. You're integrating like what you bought from Amazon this week as an episode, you know what I mean? To connect with your community. So there are things like that I look at as well. So you're balancing the structure of your podcast, making sure it's serving your people, but it's also fulfilling you deep down. And I think some of that gets lost when you've done it for so long, if you don't sort of change things up and play around a bit with your podcast strategy.
Yeah, I'm lucky that, I've had the podcast officially in August for a year, posting every week. I only missed 1 week because we were moving, and I did miss 1 week, but I will say I'm not feeling bored because I get to have like really cool conversation with really cool people like you. And I feel like I guess what you're saying is that human design is kind of like a test, like a personality test that helps you kind of like see what type of personality that they have that can best like that you can best build out a strategy like they can feel fulfilled in and everything like that. Okay, so let's talk about, let's say you say you work with a lot of coaches, right? Okay, let's say there's a coach and they want to sell their offers, and when they want to utilize their podcast to do that, how would you say they would go about in forming a strategy? Is that something that you get asked?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we look at and we would play with too. So I always would come back to, and this is my preferred method, but it doesn't work for everybody. But to me, if you have a typical podcast that is a free public platform, you definitely would not want to jump your listeners straight from that into like high ticket one-on-one coaching, right? That's thousands and thousands of dollars. It just doesn't make sense for a logical sort of stair-steppy funnel. But if this is the general spot where most people are finding you and connecting with you, then I look at it as more of a nurturing opportunity. How can you nurture those conversations that you are now creating in the, between you and your listener, even though they're not on the other end of the mic when you are recording episodes, you're still generating conversations in your community. They're getting to know you. They're getting to know who you are, what your values are, your stories, your brand through your podcast. And even if you have other people on, it's, again, you're highlighting conversations that are valuable to you. So that said, I would logically think from a business umbrella and like brand umbrella, what would make the next step easy for them that would take them from the podcast when they're not listening to another layer deeper in your brand? So could that be a freebie? Could that be a community space that you have, like a Facebook group, or, some kind of your broadcast channel on Instagram, whatever it is. If you hang out on stories all the time on your Instagram, then you're driving people over there to come communicate with you when they're not listening to the show. So, or maybe it's your email list. Whatever it is, you want to incentivize them to move out of the podcast app and drill into your brand a layer deeper, right? So sometimes that would be something free, something low ticket, some kind of community space, like I said. But either way, you want to give somebody an opportunity to speak back with you. And like, reviews is great. We need reviews for visibility for the podcast, but it's just not enough. You want them to come send you a DM and comment on that episode that you released, or go talk to you in your Facebook group and things like that. So we kind of look at it as a stair-stepping funnel. Where can you take them off of the podcast app that would make logical sense and be incentivized for them to actually do it, and then go further into your funnel?
Amen.
So that's just general. Like, that would be my strategy for, hey, this is definitely what you would put in your outro. But that doesn't mean that you certainly can't sell or promote other offers or masterclasses or your course that you're launching or your Black Friday offer. By all means, like, put your own ad, mention your own stuff in your episodes, of course. But for a general, like, this is the general funnel from podcast to the next layer, that's what I would plug into an outro for sure.
Oh, okay. Almost like, mentioning maybe our Monetizing Mompreneur Society membership, where we help mompreneurs grow their business with bundles and summits. So if you're listening to this episode at the moment, you can go ahead and plug in to the Facebook community, get on the wait list, or if our doors are open, sign in. Is that a good way, Erin?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Just
1000%.
a shameless plug, on my own podcast. But okay, so I have a question. Let's say, because a lot of people get started, right? So like for me, I just wanted to get a podcast started. It wasn't really about the numbers. And I started my podcast. When I look at my podcast, it says 3 years ago. So I started 3 years ago, but then I came back because it was just life and busy and stuff like that. And I never changed the name. Well, I did change the name. I changed the name. At first, it was like the Linda Mendable Show. I was like, you know what? Let me align it with my Facebook group. And now it's Monetizing Mompreneurs. And what I did was I said I decided to be consistent for the year, which I did, and I continue to be consistent, obviously. But let's say someone like me, trying to get onto Apple's 100, is it possible? Because I hear that you have to kind of like just do a certain type of launch when you first bring out your podcast into the world, right?
Yes, I will give you, and this is where, I will say I feel like I march to the beat of my own drum in the podcast space, because I don't think that my beliefs 1000% align with everybody else, every other podcast manager out there, which I mean, everybody has their own beliefs. So I would tell you right out of the gate that, and I have had clients, okay, I would tell you right out of the gate that context matters, right? What you're coming to the table with can very much dictate that initial outcome. So, and to me, podcast success is defined by that individual host, and the way that your show is successful may be vastly different than somebody else and how they consider their show successful. It also will vary depending upon what season you're in, what time you're in your business and your life, and what goals you have, right? So that being said, I will tell you a perfect example. I had a client once who had an incredibly large Instagram following already. That was where she primarily showed up. She had a large following. And when I say she had a large following, she also had a very active following. She could put up anything mentioning an offer that was coming out, and people would jump all over it before she'd even announce details, the name, etc. This woman can sell. Okay. And she just had a vibe and energy, and her community was all about it. Still are. That being said, when we were getting ready to launch her podcast, she would tease, which I definitely recommend going into a podcast launch. You want to tease what's coming. Not everybody is able to do that. Not everybody does that, and that's okay. But that being said, when she actually hit launch and she launched her show with her trailer, she was in the top 100 of Apple Podcasts on day one. She had easily 1,000 downloads in the first week. Now, on average, most of my podcasters can still have a launch. They don't have that large of an audience on social or that's that active and like ready to go. And they will, hit the top 100 and top 50 within the first month or two, maybe. They may not even hit 1,000 downloads on their show until 2 months in. And that's more average. Like the average, if you take every podcast, not just in the business space, but every podcast, it is 50 downloads in the first month is what's average, not 1,000 in the first week. So it really just depends on where you're starting from. I will also add to that your category matters, because that's where your ranking is, in whatever category you're put in Apple Podcasts. And I'll add another layer here. In the United States, Apple Podcasts is the most popular listening app, but globally, there are more Android users than there are Apple users. So if we only look at Apple Podcasts as a reflection and your podcast is being published globally, you may actually rank higher in other countries in your category than you do in the US. It could be Australia that you're ranking higher in, say, society and culture or business entrepreneurship. Maybe in Canada, you're ranking higher than you are in the US. So that's another thing to consider as well, is what are you competing against? If you have the Mel Robbins podcast that's under business entrepreneurship, then, or celebrity podcasts, for example, in that same area, and there's more in this area than there is in like crime on the Apple Podcasts, then it may be harder for you to hit those top chart spots in your category.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about numbers, I guess, because I'm curious. I wonder if I'm doing all right. I'm not gonna say my numbers just yet because I feel like we're just getting started.
Yeah.
But where would you say, like, when a show is published, where would you say you're at a good space, like, to keep on growing? That means you're resonating with your audience and stuff like that. How many downloads would you say? I know it varies, and I understand that, but we don't want to be like American Idol and singing off the roof of our lungs, thinking we can sing, and nobody wants to listen to us sing, right? But I know that podcasting is a skill that we can develop and make better and just market it maybe a little bit different or better. But I really believe people share podcasts. Like, hey, I listened to this podcast, absolutely amazing, it's transforming my life. You should listen to it too. So what would you say would be the good download that you're on the right track? Like, or that you need to pivot. Like if you're only getting certain downloads I feel like after a year being consistent, you can really sit down and look at your numbers and see what's up, right?
Yeah. I can't throw a specific number at you, but there is a chart that I use, and I cannot remember off the top of my head, but it will tell you, and you can Google this. You can look at what you would want to type in is like how many download numbers would put me in what percentage of Apple Podcasts. So like how many downloads at this point for my show overall, would it mean that my show is in the top 5% of podcasts or the top 10% or the top 20, 50, 100? That would give you a better gauge to kind of know where you're sitting. But I would say there are so many variables. So a couple of things that you mentioned that I definitely want to comment on. There's another, like the very first client that I had that I worked with, what we launched her podcast. She actually doesn't release episodes every single week. She releases 3 weeks in a month and then takes a week off. So if you compare her show to somebody who releases weekly or somebody who releases twice in a week, the download growth in the same amount of time, so say a year, is going to be drastically different just based on how many episodes are being published. The other thing is, downloads are important. Yes, it's a great measure for us to look at, but of course, it's not the only ROI or metric that you can look at, which is why I feel like the heart-centered side of, do I feel good about podcasting? Am I getting DMs? Am I getting people leaving me love and sharing the show is also equally as important for an ROI to see that return. Because you can have a really successful show that doesn't have thousands of downloads that you are monetizing. I've had clients who are getting 1,000 downloads. They've had their show for about 2 years and they have a big, well-known sponsor. And, are they making sales directly into things that they offer in their business or affiliate marketing? Is that sponsorship paying them back enough to warrant how much effort they're having to put into it? You'd have to ask yourself that question versus somebody else who is maybe averaging between 300 and 500 downloads an episode at this point in time, hitting about 2 years into the show, releasing episodes once a week consistently, like you are every single week, hasn't missed a week or maybe missed one. And they are consistently getting core sales and DMs constantly. So it really does depend on what you're doing. I would also add that the more niche the podcast, probably the better. But again, it just depends on what you're looking to do with it. So I would say if I was going to sit down with a client and be like, okay, is it growing? Is it not growing? Do we need to pivot it? That sort of thing. I would look at how much it's growing. Are we being consistent and seeing it slowly increasing? Are we seeing it decreasing? I would also look at, because again, that very first client that I had, it was a slow first 6 months and then things kicked up a notch. And also what mattered in that department was we increased marketing. Where was she marketing? How often were we mentioning the podcast and getting that awareness out there? Sometimes that can be a little slow and a little hard. So it's really, I would only compare yourself to yourself. You know what I mean? And look at those download numbers and see them going up. But like I said, I could subscribe to a podcast and it's going to automatically download those episodes to my phone, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm listening to them every single week. So, the back end of your Apple Podcast account shows you the episode consumption rate. That would literally show you this particular episode is being consumed on average by your listeners 90% of the way through. Or this episode may have been downloaded by everybody who subscribes or follows your show, but it was only consumed 30% of the way through. So that would give you more insight as to what topics are my listeners actually enjoying versus I still have great average downloads coming to their phone, but they're not actually listening, or they're listening halfway through and they got bored and now they skipped it. Those would be the kinds of things that I would look at.
I think this is great because, I am not too familiar with strategy with podcasting. I am more of a brand strategist, and I believe that if you can align everything to position yourself as an authority within your niche, then that really, sets the tone on your growth, right? And how you're articulating, because we can only grow as fast as what we're able to do, especially if, let's say, we're doing one-on-one products, right? Like one-on-one service. And you can only take a certain amount of clients per month, as opposed to maybe having sales and everything like that. But you can only promote it as much as you're able to show up on certain things, right? Like for me, I have been more consistent, not on the marketing side of it, but I've been more consistent of just getting a show published. That was my first thing. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to worry about like posting the episodes, even though I know that those are important, like in social media. But I was more concerned of just being consistent and having guests come on the show, and then, email and showing the show in my email list for sure. As far as, so if you're listening, get on the email list, because you'll definitely get some insider peek. But when it comes to that, that's what I was focused on. But now I'm like, okay, I want to start growing, and I want to start, and I love how you are. And you need to follow Erin on social media, on Instagram, because she is hilarious, number one. And you have so much personality, the way that you give the information. And I want to know what, if I have this question and like, hey, what numbers do I need now that I have a flow and stuff like that? What numbers do I need to look at? What, I feel like this is going to be a great episode for them. And I know I've been on a tangent and rambling, but I do have a point. My whole point is that I feel as though is what you said. Think about already the impact you're making. Like, I don't ask for testimonials on my podcast, and I got a testimonial, on a Sunday this week. And I was like, wow, that really made my day. I don't ask for it. She did. She brought in a testimonial, touched my heart. I was like, wow. So I feel like those are big deals, right? Are you impacting your community? Are you giving them items that they want to listen to? I don't know how to check the back end of that Apple, but I do see what episodes are listened to more. And where I get my analytics is more like from Pinterest. That's where I post a lot of my episodes, on Pinterest. And we did an episode on Chat GPT that had over 300 like views and a whole bunch of reshares and a whole bunch of saves. And I was like, maybe I should do my whole podcast about AI, because that's obviously the thing right now.
I mean, I would always be of the mantra, give the people what they want, as long as it still supports what you feel called to share. Because okay, I have to tell you, Linda, I think of podcasting and the way that we go about it like a marriage. It's literally a marriage between the podcast host and the listener. That is what it is. The podcast is just the medium between the two connection points, because you are sitting behind the mic and you are not preaching, but we are talking with our listeners that are listening, right? But they aren't in the room with us. So we have to make sure that we are opening the door for conversation to come back to us in order for us to give them more of what they want, and us to still also be fulfilled that we are showing up every day or every week to be sitting down and actually pouring into the mic and doing this, right? There's a reason why you feel called to share. And I mean, definitely also I have to circle back to you talking about your goal being just to consistently show up. That in and of itself is such a hard thing to do that people don't talk about it very often. Podcasting isn't, it's a long game, and it's can be very challenging, especially as a mother, especially as a business owner, trying to fit in how you're going to do it into your lifestyle in a way that works, that's sustainable long term. That is a huge hurdle. And a lot of podcasters don't make it to a year. So you definitely should give yourself many, many pats on the back for just being able to make it to that point. And now I'm not surprised that after you've hit a year mark and circled around, that now your goals are different, because, showing up consistently for you is a no-brainer now. So what you want to do next with your podcast, or what you want to focus on growing it now in a different way or at a different rate, is definitely a great goal to aspire to work towards in that following year coming now. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different things that you can look at. And like I said, I think that you have to look at it as this like two sides of the same coin. It's got to be fulfilling for you. It's got to be something that serves your listener in some form or fashion in order for it to work. And if you can have multiple opportunities and multiple spaces where people can talk back to you, they will. I also encourage people in their episodes to ask specific questions, right? So if you're sitting here, you have listeners, you are in their ears. It's very intimate in a way, right? You are having this intimate conversation with them while they're doing something else, and you're in their ears. You can ask them something very specific, and people will usually comment back to things that they very much agree with or very much disagree with, right? You can almost be guaranteed that if you put a post on Instagram or you put out a reel and you make a statement that's like spicy, people are going to have an opinion, right? So you can do that too in your podcast episodes. You can ask a very specific question related to whatever topic you're talking about, and that could be triggered back in them leaving you a review with information about what their thoughts and opinions are, or that you want them to go to social and connect with you there, or drop a note in your Facebook group and community, and that's where you're carrying the conversation on even further with your listeners. I think that that's a great way to get more people to be interactive, and the shows that we enjoy, unless we're just like consuming true crime stories and we're just like, vegging out. I think that especially in the business space, if we can give our people more opportunities to talk back with us and feel like they're part of the show, then it fuels both sides.
Okay, what can we talk about that's a bit spicy then?
Oh man. Goodness.
Oh, what has been spicy in other shows? Goodness. I don't know. I'm like, do I want to be spicy?
I mean,
to Linda's show again, it's too spicy.
Just those bold, polarizing opinions, right? Like a good one for me would be that I don't believe your podcast has to make you money, like directly make you sales. That one I think sometimes ruffles some feathers. Another one is the microphone that you choose to use. I just recently just put something on my Instagram and was like, you don't have to have a Shure brand microphone, which is what most celebrity podcasters use, in order to feel like you've made it on your podcast. Like, you don't have to have that super high quality certain look or aesthetic. You can see, I know you and I are on camera, but you can see I've got a Blue Yeti mic right over here. That was our first, very average, like everybody, podcasters, we grow up our microphone choices. I got a Blue
Yeti too. I was like, why everybody wants the Blue Yeti? Let me see what's going on. But, I got a little pink. I don't even use it. It's up in the stand. It's like a little trophy.
Yes. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like you have a glow up as you go along as a podcaster, but you don't have to have like the best setup, the best equipment, in order to have a successful show. Like, your show can feel successful because of the love you're getting in the DMs. And you hit the nail on the head. One of the best ways, there's literally a stat that I pulled from a survey in an email from Pod News a few months back, where some professional podcast study did a study, and they found that the number one way that people were finding new podcasts was not social media. It was actually from word of mouth sharing. So the fact that you are getting people who consume your podcast episodes and love your content and are sharing it with other people, that is literally the fastest way to grow.
Word of mouth is one of the fastest, period. Word of mouth is one of the fastest in any business. And whether it's, brick and mortar, even in the healthcare, you're asking everybody, hey, what's the good doctor? You just don't go by just anything. Even restaurants. Oh man, it got 2 stars. I don't know. I'm gonna go there.
Yes.
And It could have been like this, it could have been a Karen that went in there. Sorry, Karen. If your name is Karen, it's just a figure of speech. It's not you. Maybe that's a spicy topic right there. But anyways, and I feel as though, but if someone was, hey, you know what, it has many reviews, but they changed up everything and it's amazing, I would go with the word of mouth. Really? It's amazing. Are you coming with me? Because I better not go alone here. You better come with me and eat it with me. But you're right. Word of mouth is one of the best. I think that you've hit some really good points. And I think they were, like you said, have specific questions. I feel like I'm trying to be more, cognizant of this, because I do want to ask a question for every guest, one question that I ask each and every single guest. And just to prep the guest, like, hey, we're going to ask this question, think about it, and then what's going to be your answer. And I think that can also, like, at the end of the show, if I ask this one question, and then it could be like that follow-up that people are waiting for, that, ooh, I wonder how they're going to answer that question that Linda always asks on her show. Right. And that can also lead up into that engagement and letting them go all the way through the show just to hear that last question of, like, I want to hear that question because it's going to help me in whatever area that the podcast helps me in. Right. I feel like the podcast has to have, I guess, a mission, whether it's to entertain or to educate, there has to be some sort of mission, correct?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So when it comes to having a strategy within our podcast and we're trying to grow our podcast and hit bigger numbers, what do you think, other than like people DMing and stuff like that, what do you think marketing wise can we do to help reach more? Should we do reels? What would be the best? Is it email marketing? Is it, how can we spread the word of our podcast and promote that word of mouth? If you're listening to this show, please share this episode for anyone trying to start a podcast.
Yes, definitely. And share why you love the podcast so that they know what they're getting into, what you prefer about it. Yeah, I completely agree with you. So, unfortunately, we love podcasts, but unfortunately, being found through a podcast app just is not, it's not up there. It's not.
I don't search podcasts like that. No.
Yes, it's really just not at the level that it should be. So I completely agree with you. I think that you need to leverage other areas. I would definitely encourage you to be promoting your podcasts episodes in your email, because that is a place that you own, right? You own that space. And that's fabulous. You have another layer to your own community and your email list, as opposed to like your online social media areas. So I would definitely encourage that. But I will add, again, I would tease the episode content. You want to give somebody enough of what's happening in the episode, that particular episode that you're promoting, that they're going to be interested. You always got to think about it. What's in it for the listener? What's in it if they listen, right? What is going to get me to click that button in your episode to hit listen? So don't give everything away, tease it, but don't just put your like subject line, new podcast.
Oh, come on. How about Linda's new joke? No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, that would get me to open your email, as opposed to like new podcast episode drops and I see that same email subject from you every single week, right?
Oof,
I'm not saying from you, but I am saying I literally I saw this week. You want to tease whatever's in that content and then put your button in there for them to listen. But beyond that, yeah, I think especially right now, my particular preferred platforms are Instagram and TikTok, but video is king there. And being that this is an audio space, if you can record video when you were doing a podcast episode and then take clips from that to put on social media, then that's a great way to repurpose your episodes and get people to listen. Again, I think quoting yourself in some form or fashion is fabulous, even if it's having, somebody on your team pull a transcript from the episode and you can pull like this juicy nugget of wisdom or this juicy tip or just this one quote that you said that like really stood out, and then repurpose that into something that you put on your social media. That's fantastic. So leveraging drawing more people in through the video that's really getting a higher reach on social is good. Yep.
Because,
YouTube would be the other one, but not everybody wants to go there. But Google and YouTube, as far as SEO, and you using Pinterest is also in that category. Those are going to be the spaces that you can leverage the most with that. Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to pull a Gary Vee. Gary Vee would tell you to create content for the platform that you're putting your stuff on, right? Don't just create one thing and repurpose it every single space. I kind of find a hybrid, like a happy medium with that, with strategy. So again, if you were going to take a video, if you were going to sit down and your podcast was going to be like your hero content, this is where I create the most long form content, period, in my brand, then I would record video while doing it and take some of those clips and repurpose those into TikToks and Reels and drive people back to my podcast. I would also put one up on YouTube Shorts and make that part of my strategy. Then I can leverage the SEO of that content there, where it's such a good search engine. YouTube is, compared to like, Google is as well, obviously. But TikTok also is. So I would leverage those to push back to my podcast so it's easier to find it. And then, of course, yes, encouraging people to share, because we know that that's great, and referrals and things like that is always good. Having guests on your podcast, by all means, is definitely going to help you with visibility. If you're going to make it easy for your guests to promote your episodes, you want that to be as easy as possible so that they will do it. Then you can use their audience too. Those are just some ways I would definitely market. But, it depends. That depends again on what energy you can pour into it, what's easy or not.
Yes, exactly. How does one make it easy for the guests to share? Is it like an email say, hey, these are the social media graphics. Here's a blurb that you can customize. Here's some hashtags. Share away.
Yep. If you have the bandwidth, or if you have help in your business and you can do that, I would do that. So yeah, I would make that part of your process. You could do something as simple as having like a Google Drive folder where you dump stuff in. So if you are creating graphics that you're okay with them promoting, maybe it is a quote that they said, you could put that in there that has your podcast name and you want them to link back to the podcast.
Ooh, that's good.
Could do all kinds of things. Yeah. You can even, if you were sharing on like Instagram Reels, you can tag that person in your reel. So you're on the reel and they're on the reel, and then they can just share it to their stories and that kind of thing. You can give them something they can put in their Instagram stories and then link directly back to the episode. Another thing that's fun, that's not quite the same related, but it's something I like to do, is I put together a Spotify playlist of all the podcast episodes that I've ever been featured on and put that in my link in bio. So if somebody wants to listen to, those features, they just click on the playlist and run with it. But anything that you can do to make it easy for them, like to just plug and play.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I remember I had a guest, and her number one way of marketing, it wasn't social media, and it wasn't like, I guess, blogging. It was actually being on podcasts. That was her number one way to market her services and what she does. So I love that idea that you said about putting a Spotify playlist and everywhere they showed up. I'm trying to get on podcasts, but for me, it's been very, very difficult for me to get on other podcasts. So mine has been very organic reach, because I haven't been putting myself out there, in other podcasts, which I will, and definitely will do that, that Spotify That would be awesome.
It's kind of like you're featured in, you know what I mean? It's another way
yeah.
for you to show where you've been featured as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people can, I feel like in audio and in video, people can feel your energy. People can kind of like listen on the way that you communicate, on the way that you give information, and just your vibe, right? Like you were talking about that lady's vibe. She can just be like, "Hey, I am about to sell." Yes, we're in.
Yes.
Shoot, that's some magic right there.
Well, and since we're talking about strategy and you putting yourself onto other people's shows, this is definitely a challenge that a lot of podcasters face. I've had clients, and I mean, I can tell you there are like Facebook groups that you could join, but it depends on to collab with other podcasters. But also being in the online space, I know that not everybody wants to just go mingle and mix with people that have podcasts for pleasure, is what I like to call them. And I told you that my husband used to be on multiple podcasts. So his name is Joe. I refer to him sometimes in my content as like, you may not want to go hang out with the Joe Schmo who has a bro podcast that like he records in his basement. And like, that's not your vibe at all. You know what I mean?
Marketing.
Yes. Yes. So, joining a Facebook group to try to make those connections could feel challenging. There are other ways that you can connect with other business owners that have podcasts to try to do features. But one of the quickest things that you could do, my biggest qualm or like caveat is make sure that you do your research before you pitch anybody and be yourself in your pitch. And this is one of those things where I'm going to pivot myself away from other podcasters who may have pitching programs and things or services that can pitch you. Those exist. I'm not going to shame on those, but I have found, yes, spicy. Because I mean, literally, I have a client who I work with now. She's somebody I've worked with for over 2 years, and she gets the most cringy podcast pitches for people wanting to be on her show all the time in her email, and she'll just send them to me and we'll just laugh about it because they have literally not done their research at all. It's the same rinse and repeat email template that they send out to like 10 different people that day, and it's not custom to her. They're like, "Oh, I love your podcast." No, you don't. You've never listened to my podcast. It's obvious by this email. You know what I mean? So you don't want to be that person. But what you can do if you go into like Apple Podcasts and the app in particular, and like if I was pulling up your show and if I scroll all the way to the bottom of your main show spot, it will automatically show you, it will have a little section and it will have podcasts underneath. And it's like, if you like this show, you may like these too. So it recommends other shows that may be similar to that particular show, which you can leverage this as a podcast host. Go scroll down and look and see what 4 or 5 other shows it's recommending. Click on those shows. Immediately go look at their first or second episode and just look at the title. Do they have guests or not? You would immediately know, right? Because most of the time people are going to put their guest name in the title or somewhere in the episode description. So if they don't have guests, don't pitch to them, right? That's pretty obvious. But then also you want to look at, okay, is it another show that reaches moms in entrepreneurship, or is it another show about women in business? Because then you're going to know based on their show description and their cover and their title, what their target listener is, like who they're trying to speak to. And if your audience is the same as their audience, then, that's going to be an aligned connection as opposed to their favorite crime junkie podcast. Like that's not going to be the best place to go and try to pitch yourself, right? Just for visibility. So that's a good one too. And then you could also look at side venues, you know what I mean? So like if you were a business coach and you wanted to get on other business coaches podcasts, you could, but maybe instead of, if you coach on marketing and visibility, somebody else has a business coaching business that is more in the spiritual space. You may have the same clients, but you're coaching on 2 different things. So your offers are not going to conflict either. So that's, it's in the same world, but it's not exactly the same. You could have really good conversations that way too. And then if you're connecting with other podcasters and you have your own podcast, you also can leverage doing a swap or a collab is what I would call it. Right. So like you come onto my show, I'll come onto your show, and then you're both benefiting.
Yes, I have been invited for like, a swap.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm going to speak with someone about being a panelist in the type of a podcast. It's coming up
Yeah.
later, guys. I'll share those episodes. Maybe I can get a clip. Can I get a clip?
Yeah. And I mean,
I can plug it in.
ask away, ask away. And, you don't have to be formal with a pitch either. Like some of my current retainer clients get the best conversations from people who are just in their DMs and like, hey, I listened to an episode of your show. I know that we have the same type of audience. I would love to come on if you have free space and want to have a chat about X, Y, and Z conversation. Or like we could speak about mom life, podcasting, the real crap that goes on behind your online business, right? Like you just toss it out there. It's just like making friends in DMs. And sometimes those lead to the best conversations and it's networking at the core, really.
Yes, yes, it's networking. It's that's what I love about podcasting is like, you get to meet so many different people and personalities and just like allow them to shine with what they know. Like that's how I feel. Like I'm so invested and I'm like, wow, like this is such a wealth of information that you have. And you get more of that than what you do in a single, IG post or even a feed.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really know, like, does this person know what they're talking about? Absolutely, when you get them on the podcast.
Yes, you have so much more space to dive deeper. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a little bit vulnerable here. So lately, at first I cringed. At first I cringed just having to like listen back to my episodes. And I was like, wow, someone left me a review. Let me listen to some of these episodes, see what they're seeing, because I can get a little bit like, man, am I doing a good job? I hope that people are resonating. I hope that is bringing value into their lives, right? And we all go through that. So if you're growing your business, like it doesn't stop. Doubt becomes your best friend. But I have noticed, and I pray to God that no one talks ill of this laugh I do all the time in almost every single episode, yo. I'm praying. I'm just giving like a little drop, like, yo, if my laugh is annoying, like DM me and let me know so I can just nip it and not do it.
I
You're
love it.
cracking up.
I am cracking up because you know what? You'll probably get a DM from somebody that's like, no, 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 Linda. That's literally what I love about your episodes is
Oh my
I
gosh.
wait for the laugh. I wait for the giggle. You know what I mean?
Oh my God. Because I'm wondering. I was like, yo.
I have thought very, very long and hard, and maybe it will come to fruition about creating t-shirts or some kind of like stickers or merch specifically for the phrases that my clients say the most. And
Ooh.
they know, but it's like at this point, I'm like, that's your signature thing. Like if
Ooh.
you are asking your guest a question and they speak for a few minutes and then they're done speaking and you're going to ask another question, one of my clients will always say, I love it. And then she'll start speaking. And when you've been editing and listening to somebody's podcast for years at this point, like you just know what those certain phrases are that are totally them. And I'm like, you need this on t-shirt. You need this on a sticker or something. Like this is your signature thing in your
Yes.
podcast. And I love it. And see, and there, I just did it too.
I say a lot of amen. Absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
You know what? I think that would be a banger. I think you should like put as well, the word
Yes.
and then put just a
Mm-hmm.
little mic. I'm a podcaster.
Yes. Uh-huh.
I think that would just go.
The
Yes.
yeah, lip smacks are my thing, whatever it is. Yeah, I have a list. I won't lie. There's a note in
Ooh,
my
I would
phone.
love
I have a
one.
list.
I would love one that says, yes, I giggle. I'm a podcaster.
Yes. I would be here for that. I'm gonna
Right?
add
I
it
mean,
to
let's
the
make it
list.
fun.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, because I was like, oh my gosh, Linda, I'm not annoyed by it, but someone could be. And I do a little cringe. I cringe a little. I'm not gonna say I die inside because I don't. I just cringe a bit. So where can people find you?
Y'all can find me on Instagram and TikTok. My handle is my name. So it's Erin Tofani, which sounds funky, the last name there, but it's Tofani. So that's my handle for both places. And then my website is the same, erintofani.com. But I am mostly on Instagram. You'll see me on stories. And then also I'm playing around on TikTok too. So it's fun.
Yes, you're always giving some good tips. And I love like the courage that you give women. Because you were talking about the mic. Because I fell into the trap of getting that Blue Yeti. It's now a trophy. Like, hey, I'm a podcaster. You can see it back there. And I guess get yourself a trophy. Get the Blue Yeti just to sit on top of your desk, not to use because what would you say is a good mic though? Like a starter mic. So I'm looking for a mic right now.
Are you? I'll have to send you. I have a resources page on my website where I've got some flagged on Amazon. I'll send that to you as well. I can't tell you the specific name of it because it's name and letters and numbers.
Yes.
But I will tell you,
Techna.
yes. Yeah. Like my headphones are Audio Technica and I think the mic is also that, but I'm using a Rode mic. I have a Blue Yeti. We have some other ones. I would encourage you when you're looking for a mic to think about where your recording space is. And there's two different kinds of mics and the way that they work is different. So like this mic, when I used to have a dog, he has since passed away. But when I had a dog, it's okay. He could be upstairs and I'm recording in what is the basement of my house. And he could just move around on the hardwood floor with his little, feet on the floor. And this mic would pick it up. It was super sensitive. Whereas there are other kinds of mics that, it's going to be a little bubble around you. And that's all they're really going to pick up. It's more like omnidirectional, is everywhere.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's the one for me. A whole bunch of the kids running around sometimes.
Yep. This is why I record when they're not home. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of decent mics in different budgets. So I'm all for using what you need for your space, and then you can always upgrade your mic quality later. But Rode is a good brand. Shure is also a good brand, of course, but those are like the big bad mamma jamma. I feel like I'm a pro podcaster mics. But Blue Yetis and like the Snowballs as well by Blue are
what is the
classics.
hookup that the mic is like overhead? Because I would like that one. Like it just comes over your head.
You can do that with something like this one, this Rode mic. It just connects at the bottom here, but it's a boom arm. So you see this?
It's a boom arm.
It's a boom arm. Yep. So you can get a boom arm that attaches to your desk. You can get one that's freestanding on the floor, and then you just orient it that way, and then you'll screw your mic directly into it. But even your Blue Yeti could screw into it.
Ooh, okay. I mean, I think I lost the cord because we moved. I think I don't know what the kids did with it. But I noticed it was picking up a lot of it was going like that. Mm-hmm. And I bought the little pink fluffy thing to like cover it, but I haven't tested it out if it will be, because I was using it and it just would give a lot of interference. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, shoot, I don't got the time right now to research what mic I want to get. So I'm just gonna hit record, and that's what I've been doing.
And you know what? You're better for it because nobody wants to listen to crappy audio. Just throwing that out there. If it's got a lot of background noise and like you were saying, the little going on.
Yeah, my guest would say, "Hey, your mic, Linda." Ooh, I was like, no. Oh my gosh. I first started on my phone, on my cell phone.
Did you?
First started, yes. I started on my cell phone. Now look at me, no mic on a desktop.
And I mean, again, to each his own. I had a client who we shifted her podcast because I'm going to be totally honest, she does most of her coaching from her bathtub.
Wow.
So, yes.
It's echoey. You can tell someone's in a bathtub. Like, are you in the bathroom right now? I hear running water.
We had to think about that. Like, how can we get the best sound quality while you're still literally in the bath while you're recording with also keeping you safe? And then I've also have other clients where they have gotten a like full headset. So they have their headphones and there's a mic attached, and that worked better for them than having something sitting on a desk. And then I've worked with clients in the past who recorded from their closet with a blanket over their head, because they wanted the best sound quality ever and they were not doing video. So of course, their mic choice would be vastly different than somebody else who's recording on video. So yeah, it truly varies. And there's so many things that you could do. I mean, even like the Rode makes little lavalier mics. And like you said, recording from your phone, if that's what you needed to do to get the podcast out there, you could clip a little mic to your shirt and record that way.
I did it on my phone when I first started. Because I didn't know how. I was like, how can I do? I don't know how to do this. And I had a laptop. I didn't even have a Mac yet. Did not have a Mac. I was a web designer with a regular Toshiba. And then little by little I upgraded, and then I had a desktop, and then I upgraded. But where we start off is where we start off. Like, don't give up. Like, you may think like, oh my gosh, what is this for? I'm starting on my phone. Who would listen? Maybe nobody at first, but then it gets better.
It definitely gets better. Your first episode sounds so vastly different from your 50th or your 100th. Like it just is. You improve as a speaker as well. That's something another one of my clients she has said that she always wished that she had started her podcast sooner because of the networking opportunities that it opened up for her, and how she has become a better speaker, a better, question asker through interviews and having conversations with people. You find your rhythm and you find what you like and where you want to take conversations and all of that. But you just have to start. Like you said, you just have to start. You have to find the way that works for you to be consistent. And then you can always add things in over time. I would rather add to something that you're doing that's working than take things away. So again, if you have to start with recording directly on your phone and then get your first mic and then you upgrade and now you have a closet full of like 10 different mics that you use for different reasons or never touch again, it is what it is. Like, you have reached whatever level in podcasting, and there you go.
Yeah, I mean, using it as home decor. Yeah. I love it. It's beautiful. It's trophy. It's a trophy mic. The Blue Yeti is a trophy mic. So if you have one.
Yes, it's like a rite of passage. You have a new level unlocked when you've reached a certain stage. Yeah, I completely agree.
New level unlocked. Yeah, that's good. I love it. All right. So thank you so much for being on the show, Erin. Absolutely love this episode.
Thank you, Linda. I've enjoyed every minute.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have a chance, stop by the website at lindabendable.com. Sign up for the Blog Cure, which is an awesome course that I created that will help you set up your blog or take your blog to the next level. And join us over at Monetizing Mompreneurs Facebook group. I just want to say again, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening.